Okay, so shall we get this rolling? Okay, in that case, I'm going to start. So today I'm going to tell you about the science of gamification. Notice the science there, okay? So it's a little bit more theoretical, a little abstract, and then John will actually back me up with some more real, tangible examples, okay? So here's the agenda. I'm going to tell you what is gamification, what does it mean to your business, and why does it actually work, okay? And that's actually very important because once we understand how it works, we could do the last thing. We can actually evaluate future gamification strategies, and we can design our own gamification strategies, okay? So let's begin. So in 2011, Gartner named gamification as one of the emerging technology in their hype cycle. Okay, that means it's going to be something big in the next 5 years or 10 years, okay? They also predict that by 2015, 70% of the global 2,000 company will have at least one gamification application. And more than 50% of the global 2,000 company will have gamification to manage the innovation process, okay? So what is this gamification anyway? Anybody here familiar with gamification? Okay, a lot of you are. Okay, the idea is really simple, right? There are things that we love to do. We love to play game. We love to have fun. And there are also things that we don't like to do or just don't do for whatever reason. Okay? And the idea of gamification is really can we take some elements of these in the game that we enjoy and put them into things that we don't do for whatever reason. Either we hate them or we don't have time for them, and make them more engaging and more fun. Okay, so this is the definition right here. The use of game attribute to drive game-like player behavior in a non-game context predictably, okay, with predictability. So there's a few terms in this definition that I want to clarify. One is game attribute. You have to use this game attribute. So what is this game attribute anyway? Thank you, thank you. So what is this game attribute anyway? So they can be game mechanics, game dynamics, which is what a lot of people normally talk about out there. But it can be game design principle, gaming psychology, even the narrative, the incentives, right? Anything that a game designer used to make a game fun and engaging, right? These are gaming attributes, right? And we use that to drive game-like behavior, right? Basically, engagement, interaction, learning, collaboration, competition, and even to the very extreme, we could drive addiction, and people have died playing games, believe it or not. I'm serious. Look it up. Google for it. You know, I'm not kidding. And you do this in a non-game context. Okay, so you could gamify anything pretty much. Okay, you could gamify education, work, basically any place that you're trying to drive a human behavior, you can use gamification. Okay, so notice that at the end it's non-game context, right? So if you already have a game, it should already be using game attribute to drive game-like behavior, right? Unless you have a really bad and poorly designed game, a game doesn't need to be gamified further, right? Okay. All right. So that's what it is. So what can this do for your business? Well, some of the most common commercial use case of gamification is deepens engagement. And that works both internally and externally, okay? Internally within employees and externally with your customers. And sustain loyalty, right? And that obviously is concept external to the company. And it can onboard your new users. And these users can both be employee or customers as well. Okay? And you say, well, so what? So what? Right? So Best Buy is able to engage their customers externally to collaborate and help each other answer each other's questions through gamification and save them $5 million. Okay? And Sephora, on the other hand, was able to engage their customers externally, right, to drive sales, like 2.5 times more. Moreover, they could sustain their loyalty so that, you know, these extremely passionate fans spend like 10 times more. Okay? So that's something that's the so what, right? If you don't care about $5 million, you don't care if people spending 10 times, then you can pack up and go home, right? So, all right. Now, actually, John here is going to give you 2 more examples later on the external engagement and onboarding new users later on. So why does this work? Why do gamification work? Okay, so so if you ask some of the gamification practitioners out there, they're going to say that it's probably these game mechanics and game dynamics. And there's lots of them, as you see. And new ones being created every single day. This is the job of a game designer. So don't bother remembering all this, right? So as a scientist, I'm going to try to understand this a little deeper and ask, well, why did this thing drive behavior? Why is it able to turn something that we don't like to do into something desirable? What's the magic behind it, right? To understand that, we have to understand something called the Fogg's behavior model. And so Professor Fogg at Stanford is a friend of mine. He basically posed that underlying every human behavior, there's 3 factors. There's motivation, an ability, and a trigger. Motivation just means that the person wants to do it, and ability means he can do it, and trigger means he's told to do it, right? And the important thing about his model is not the fact that you have to have these 3 factors, it's that you have to have these 3 factors at the same time. Okay, so the temporal convergence is what drives action. So all those game mechanics and game dynamic that you've seen on the little colorful slide there, is all they're trying to do is basically drive a user up to the upper right-hand corner of the motivation ability plane, and then you trigger them, right? And there is actually a threshold, and that's we determine this by really sophisticated behavioral analytics to determine where the threshold is, and then you send the trigger. Okay, so motivation, ability, and trigger. Okay, so let's look at the first factor, motivation. What motivates people? Well, there's a lot of theories on motivation, and so the first one that I want to talk about is Maslow's need theory. Basically, everybody has seen this Maslow's hierarchy, right? Maslow called this the lower 4 level, the deficiency needs. So basically, the physical and safety are basically food, water, stuff that you already are satisfied in the modern society, right? So we don't really play games for these kind of things because these are we have this already, right? But you can imagine like at the time when we were cavemen and herders, right? We play games for food and shelter, right? They're resources that we play for, right? And now, basically, what do we play for now? We play for social cohesion, right? And we play for esteem, essentially, right? We get status, achievement, and reputation, right? So that's what a lot of these gamification, game mechanics, and game dynamic leverages on. Okay, so in fact, all these are game mechanics and game dynamic that you've seen before. Okay, so they're just different words. Psychology calls them one way, and then the game designer calls them something else. All right. So what about self-actualization? What is it? So if you look at Maslow's work a little more carefully, he actually identified all of these kind of idealistic human quality. He called these meta motivators. Okay, and these are also what motivates people to do things. Okay, and so if you think Maslow is kind of old school, 1943, there's a more recent book by Dan Pink called Drive. Okay, and he basically took 3 of these meta motivators and he expanded them in great detail. So what drives human intrinsically is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Right, and all these are in fact game mechanics and game dynamics. Right, mastery is basically points, level up, progression, set completion, right? And purpose is basically, quest, discovery, whatever. Okay, you name it. Okay, so another theory of what motivates people is Csikszentmihalyi's flow. Okay, that's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I actually met him at USC one time, so that's the correct pronunciation. Yeah. So anybody here know about flow? Good. Okay, so flow is the intrinsic state of optimal state of intrinsic motivation. So people are really when people are really immersed in what they do, they forget about food, they forget about tired, they forget about themselves. They go into flow. So when I trying to solve a really difficult math problem, I go into flow. Okay, but Csikszentmihalyi actually characterized the condition that's necessary to go into flow. Basically, that's when the challenge that you face have to match your skill. Right? If it's kind of on the lower there, if the challenge is too easy, you get bored. Right? If the challenge is too challenging, then you get worried too. You say, you get frustrated. I can't finish it. Right? I can't do it. Right? Okay. So flow is just kind of fine line between kind of control and arousal. Right? People kind of love to be in the control state, but if it's kind of, they're too much in control, right? You do the same thing over and over again. You have perfect control. You also get bored. Right? And on the other hand, if people like to be aroused, right? You kind of challenge a little bit challenge. But if it's too challenging, they also get frustrated, right? All right. But the key point to understand here is that people's skill changes over time, right? You learn things. You get better at what you do, whatever you did, right? So even if you are in flow right now, over time, you move into this boredom state simply because you acquire more skill. You get better at what you're doing. So what used to be challenging and you make you in this flow state becomes easy and kind of bored, right? So the obvious thing to do is, well, you pick another task that's harder, right? Pick another more challenging task and you can move back into flow. But in reality, that's actually very hard to do. It's very hard to pick a task that's just right to move you back into flow. It's either more of the same thing, so you get still kind of easy and boring, or is too hard. So, you have to learn a little more skill. In this case, you have to learn a little bit more. The learning curve is kind of shallow to move you back into flow. But when your boss typically assigns you the next project, typically say, oh, good job, you did a wonderful job this time. Next time I'm going to give you something really, really hard. So it looks like this, right? And typically people have to learn a lot more skill and takes a lot more time to move back into flow. And that's why people don't normally get into flow. But people love it. People like to be in that state, right? So good gamification must have the ability to have really, really fine control of how difficult the level is. Okay, they have to have really fine control. They can control it as detailed as they want. Okay, so there are lots of theory about what motivates people. So I won't have time to go through all the theory. There's like, self-efficacy theory, cognitive dissonance theory, there's self-determination theory, there's a lot of them. So let me move to the second factor, motivation, ability, and trigger. So let's look at ability. What empowers people with greater ability? So first thing I want to say is that ability is not skill. Has nothing to do with skill, okay? A skill may be ability, but it's not the same, okay? So ability is your measure of your access to the resources that's needed to perform the task at the time you're performing the task, okay? So these resources, I kind of group them into three categories. They're essentially effort resources. These could be physical effort or mental effort. They could be scarce resource, such as money, time, attention, special permission, or it could be skill, right? I mean, if you need a special skill to do something, then that's your resource. And it could be some adaptability resource as well, such as norms that you don't want to break. Okay. All right. So ability is context dependent, because why? Different people have access to different kind of resource, right? A teenage kid is not going to have a lot of money, but he has lots of time. Right? So something that requires a lot of time is maybe really easy for him, but requires a lot of money is not going to be very easy for him. Right? He doesn't have the ability to do it if he requires a lot of money. Right? But for me, I'm very busy, right? And I don't have time. I may have a little bit of money. So if something that requires a lot of time, I won't have the ability to do it. Okay? So notice, I want to reemphasize the fact that ability and skill are not the same. Okay? The example I want to give you is that anybody have the skill to tweet, to send a tweet, right? Twitter is so easy. Type 140 characters, push a button, right? You're done. But I don't have the ability to tweet right now because what happened? I have lost my access to the time resource and the attention resource to actually type the tweet right now. And I also don't want to break the norm of tweeting while I'm talking, right? So those are resources that I don't have now, which is required for me to send a tweet right now. Right? Does that make sense now? Okay. All right. So one of the things so the question is what actually empowers user to give them more ability is simplicity. Okay, so John will actually give another example of how do you simplify prioritization down to a single click so that people actually do them for you, essentially. All right? Okay, so last factor is a trigger. Right? So a trigger is something that prompts a user to carry out the action. So it can be anything. It could be a beep on the phone, could be a ding on your email, whatever. As long as the user is aware of it and he understands what those trigger means. Those are the two things that's important, right? So trigger is all about timing, right? There are lots and lots of bad triggers, such as pop-up ads and spam mails, right? We certainly are aware of them, right? And we know what they mean. So they are triggers, but they're bad triggers because they come at a time that we are either not motivated or don't have the ability to take action, right? They come at a time, I don't know, some pop-up ad may come with things like, I don't know, Viagra or something. I'm not interested, right? I'm not motivated to, I don't want it, right? And even if I do want it, if it's something relevant, I may not have the ability because I don't have time, I don't have the attention, I don't have the money or whatever to take the action, right? So good triggers are carefully timed such that they are activated when the user have the motivation and the ability to take the action. Okay, that's the key. So the effectiveness of a trigger actually depends on different types of gamers out there. Okay, so Richard Bardo is a gaming researcher in London, actually in UK. So he have identified 4 different types of gamers out there. Okay, these are the achiever, explorer, killers, and the socializers. Okay, so they have different kind of personal characteristics. Achievers are socializers just like to social, and killer like to win and beat other people, right? So they're different. Okay, so these are called Bardo type. Okay, and they're kind of how common they are is actually I put them in a percent right next to them. So the killer is the most rare kind. They're less than 1%. Okay, so let's see how do we trigger them, right? Killers, as we've seen, are highly competitive. So the best way to trigger them is to challenge them, right? So Foursquare did this really well. So you've been just out as a mayor of a certain venue, and then if you're a killer, you're going to go back and say, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get my mayorship back, right? But on the other extreme is socializer. So socializer is the most prevalent type, okay? So they are the opposite. They actually don't like competition. If you put them in a confrontation, they actually turn them off. So how do we trigger these people? Well, I mean, they value relationship, right? So the best way to trigger them is to show that your friends are doing it. Their friends are doing it. 20 of your friends are coming to social tech. Wouldn't you join them? Yes, they love it. If you're a socializer, you would join them, right? All right. Achiever, that's very simple. They are, driven by status and special access. They like to be, so this is a lot of the gamification, game mechanics actually leverage this, the fact that a lot of people are achiever, but actually that's actually a very small percentage of the population. Explorers, on the other hand, are driven by, I would say, like, discovery and uniqueness of their ability. Okay? So how do you trigger them? You call upon their unique skill, right? You are the only one who have the skill to save the world. So they're going to say, great, I'm going to do it, right? But don't give them any time and spatial constraint, right? They like to explore. So give them the freedom to explore, right? All right, so that's how you trigger these people. So now we know why. So that gives us a kind of good understanding of what motivates people, right? And that's all the positive psychology. And what gives them ability is basically make the task simpler, right? To give them the access to the resource that's needed to do the task, right? That actually simplifies the task. And then the third one is a trigger, right? So now let's see how we could use this. So if we know why gamification works, then we can actually evaluate the effectiveness of any gamification strategy in the future, right? So let's look at an example. So this is, anybody heard of this thing? Speed camera lottery. So this speed camera, it works just like any ordinary speed camera. If you speed, it takes a snap of your car and then it gives you a citation, right? And it collects the money. But it also takes picture of the people who are driving under the speed limit, the good drivers. Okay? And the interesting thing is that, like, those people who are driving under the speed limit gets to win the money that's collected from the speeders. Okay? Isn't that clever? So let's see if that's a good gamification strategy. Okay? So is there motivation? Sure. They want to win money, right? Win the lottery. Do the player have the ability to take the action? Certainly, they're driving, right? They could certainly just step on the brake and slow down. And is there a trigger? Well, they're looking at it, right? So is there a temporal convergence of these 3 factors? Probably yes, right? When you're looking at the sign, you can slow down and you're motivated to win money. Yeah, certainly they could slow down, right? So this is actually a very effective gamification strategy. People actually, the average speed limit before they put up this thing was 32, and after they put it up, it's 25. Amazing, okay? So let's take a look at a case where it didn't work quite well. So So there's a company where the sales executive essentially failed to assign leads to their sales rep regularly. So they want to gamify this. Okay, so remember, gamification is all about driving behavior, right? In the speed camera lottery case, we want to drive, the behavior they want to drive is driving under the speed limit, right? In this case, we want to drive lead assignment, right? So they essentially created an iPad app for lead assignment. It's a golf game, okay? So they essentially use the tilt sensor of the iPad. So when the lead comes in, it shows up as a golf ball. And you have to roll the ball into the hole, and the holes are your sales reps. Okay? Interesting, right? All right, so let's take a look at, is there a motivation? Yes. It's new, and it's fun, and salespeople love to play golf. Right? And this probably trigger, there's a notification system that will tell you when the lead comes in, the golf ball shows up. But what about ability? This thing actually reduces the ability. Why? Because now it's actually less efficient for the sales executive to assign a lead. It takes them more time. It takes more resources because more time resources, right? It used to take them 1 second to assign a lead. Now they have to kind of roll this ball around and kind of roll it in there, right? That takes more time, right? What happens if 100 lead, 1,000 lead? Right? Is it really going to really going to be making it more efficient? No. It takes, so there's obviously you cannot have three factor all converge at the same time because it doesn't even have all three of the factor. The second factor is missing, right? So it's probably a bad idea. But it doesn't mean that people won't use it, right? They may use it just because of the novelty, but it won't be a sustainable, predictable strategy, okay? So don't take gamification like too literally. It's not really putting a game on top of something else. So now we know how to evaluate any gamification strategy, right? But we can actually design new gamification strategies ourselves, right? Following this principle, right? It's all about, driving these three factors together at the same time, right? You want to use positive motivation, positive feedback, positive psychology, make the perceived task simpler, and then you trigger at the right time, right? And then, so now I'll hand it over to John to give you examples of how this works in the real life.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what we've done kind of in the real world. And I don't think we knew we were applying gamification techniques along the way. We were just trying to solve some problems that we have. And just as a quick introduction, has anyone heard of National Instruments? I see. Okay, good. How about LabVIEW? That's our flagship brand. Okay, I work for the company called National Instruments, and it's important to understand. I'll give you a little background so you can understand the context of what we are trying to do with some of these techniques. We've been around a long time. We like to say we went public the old-fashioned way. We earned it in '95, but you can see we started in '76, and we introduced our flagship software package called LabVIEW in 1986. So it's been around a long time, and it's still going strong. And most of what I'm going to tell you about is how we're making our software users successful. So it's around this LabVIEW platform. And we're global, and we sell to scientists and engineers. So the conferences I go to tend to, people look a little different. But I'm a double E too, so I kid because I am one. Here's some of our visionary graphics to try to explain what we do. We empower scientists and engineers to build measurement and control systems. And so whether you're mostly for testing and automating measurement systems. So very geeky stuff. And you can see across the bottom, we have all this different hardware for measuring and controlling and monitoring, thousands of different options. And it all is enabled through a programming language called LabVIEW. And so that's the key, is our success as a company depends on our users being able to use this LabVIEW programming language. And some of you may actually be using this and not knowing it, because LabVIEW our most consumer-like usage is we partner with Lego. And if you've ever used or seen the Mindstorms robot, the software that comes with Lego is LabVIEW. It's a form of LabVIEW. The professional version is used to do very advanced things, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. You know, they're using LabVIEW to monitor and control the control system for that thing and try not to blow a black hole into the universe. So very complicated stuff, very high speed control type algorithms. And again, so the point is, we have a couple of key business challenges. One, it's a little easier now, but 20 years ago when I started, all of our customers would buy our products, rip open their computers, plug them into the backplane, and start writing driver level code. And so, you know, you're messing with the operating system. Tech support was how we were successful. Free tech support, 800 number, anyone could call in and get help. Well, that's, as we've scaled, and you see the chart, you know, we can't hire enough engineers to answer all those questions. And so that's one. And then the second is how we prioritize what we build into the platform. And the third one we're trying is how do we make people actually know how to use the product. It's a very advanced, complex programming language with 30 years of features baked into it. Okay, so this is fairly standard tech support. I mean, not the most, probably not what you were expecting to hear about with a gaming topic, but it's actually been incredibly successful for us. We use a platform from a company called Lithium. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but our tech support forums are where we started with listservs and news groups and things like that, and it's grown into this platform on our website. We've had Lithium in place since 2004. And what we started is we have all these different discussion forums for all our product lines. LabVIEW's the biggest one. And we went out and trained all of our engineers in the different R&D groups how to get on there and help support. Because in addition to supporting the customers, it gives them a lot of direct feedback from their users. And then we have a dedicated support team. And what we found is over time, not only we've changed our business model to where tech support is not free, it's part of a subscription program. So these forums become more and more the frontline defense. You can get in here for free, post a question, look for an answer if you're not on subscription. But then you can call in and talk to people if you are. What we did to try to ease that transition is every question that gets posted here gets routed to our tech support engineers. And so we guaranteed that you're going to get a good experience. You're going to get an answer. And what we found over time is that more than half of the questions now are actually answered by other customers. And some of the gamification techniques that Michael described are really what we're tapping into. Because these engineers are, you know, their power is all delivered from behind a keyboard. So it's a total meritocracy. The egos of who knows more and who can prove that they know more than the other guy is really what drives a lot of this stuff. And I think there's a little bit of, you know, helping others. The thing about LabVIEW that's interesting is it's started on the Mac, and it's got this Mac-like following. They're cult-like almost. And so there's a lot of, if any of you have used a programming language, engineers and programmers almost have a religious sort of debate about what languages are better. And so LabVIEW is one of these graphical programming. I won't get into the graphical programming thing, but it's a whole new way of doing it. And so the advocates that use the product have made it successful. And they know more about it than we do. So we have this fairly complicated set of criteria that that assigns a reputation level to you as a user. The more questions you answer, the more activity you have in terms of posting gives you value. And then as other people come in and give you kudos for a good answer or an accepted solution, you get more points. And so we've seen people move up the ranks of these levels. And this is really where a lot of the motivation comes into play for these guys that tend to be very timid, quiet, sloppy-looking engineers, but behind the keyboard, they're providing an incredible amount of value and knowledge to the community. And the Lithium platform is driving this whole thing. And we try to have fun with it too. When we started this, we had the community help us name the levels, and I guess NI, the Knights of Ni from Monty Python were sort of the ultimate level. And so this is one of the last customer who, the knighting ceremony we had at our user conference. We do send each new Knight of Ni a shrubbery, and you can see that in the back. But these guys have posted more than 10,000 times. And actually, the top guys are now over 25,000 posts. So it's, again, from a business standpoint, we used to call it web math, but we would look at all of the call deflection that we're getting from this effort, and it's in the millions of dollars that we're saving. But and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about loyalty and what, the additional benefits we get from the obvious efficiency things. So anyway, that is one, and that's fairly straightforward. I think you've probably seen that or can imagine that. Now, the next one is more about prioritizing what our R&D team does. And this has been more recently, again, we're using a platform from Lithium to drive this, but we call this the idea exchange. And again, if you think about our LabVIEW platform, it's our flagship. We have hundreds of developers working on it. And internally, we have all of these hardware groups that are constantly demanding more features from the platform. It's kind of like, the Windows team at Microsoft. The whole, how do you prioritize what you're going to do with Windows or iTunes at Apple? And so when we came to the R&D team and said, hey, I got an idea. We're going to let the community tell us what they want us to build into the platform. The engineering manager for the LabVIEW team wasn't that thrilled, as you can imagine. We're going to give yet another priority queue to try to balance for the R&D team. And that's what this ideas site is. And so what our users can do is they can come in and they can post a feature request. And here's another area. What we're finding is they're not just posting ideas. They're basically developing the entire spec with images. This is how it works now. This is how it should work. And, they're very mundane, very low level, seemingly unimportant features. But I remember talking to a customer. I used to run the software business group at NI. I remember a customer, he was almost trembling in either tears or rage because he uses the product every day, 8 hours a day, and the tiny little tweaks that can make him more productive have a huge impact on his daily life. And of course, at NI, we may get caught up in what new application areas we can go into. So we're trying to find new business, but we have to balance and keep the natives happy, keep the existing users on the platform. And so this is another one that's been wildly successful. We've had a bunch of ideas, and again, it follows the same model of posting an idea is great, but then people vote. And so the voting is what drives the priority. And obviously, the higher your reputation is, your votes carry more weight. And so as your ideas move up the chart, that also adds value to your reputation. So it's all based on the same scoring system for people, but really what they're getting is a better product. And so that's been live for a couple of years now. Last year, now it's a standard part of our launch. We roll out the platform every year with new features. And so this is a standard marketing slide, and the features that came directly from the users, we can promote and kind of feed that energy of it's your platform as the user community, and you're driving part of our priorities. And in R&D, it's worked out great because now we just resource limit it. We take a couple guys, and we have a dedicated staff whose job is to pick off these features and implement. And that actually makes it a lot easier than trying to guess what's going to have an impact with the users. So this has been another very successful experiment for us. The third one is really the big challenge, and that is when you open the box of this software platform, how do you go from novice to expert and ultimately advocate? And this example is from our group in China. So the previous presentation, if you were in here when they talk about social media, you know China is different. And if you haven't heard, there's a lot of engineers in China, and none of them pay for software. We sold our first copy, which will be our last copy, into China. And but the potential is incredible. I mean, I heard one stat that if you took the top 10% of students in high school in China, that's more than all the students in the U.S. And so and they're all moving into the middle class, they're all moving into, and they're focusing so much on engineering that this is a huge opportunity for us. So our anti-China branch, who runs the local business there, has built a community, and it's meant to, you're not going to be able to follow everything they're doing. It's pretty amazing, but they are really trying to drive users up the proficiency curve, and because we can't teach them ourselves, and we have to give them motivation to become more skilled, kind of what Michael was talking about. So on this website, we have a number of tools to A, get them motivated, and B, teach them. So they have something called LabVIEW Idol, which is a coding contest. And again, you have, see who can sling the best code to solve some problem. And the users vote and all that stuff. But a lot of it is around sharing sample code and taking training classes. And so we are obviously bootstrapping this. We've got support engineers who develop training content. And they have seasons and episodes and 10 chapters per each season. And as you download each class, you get points. You get homework assignments, so you have to hand in, and then you get quizzes. And in addition to that, the user community can contribute. So the users can upload their own chapters or their own questions or their own sample code. And again, it's there's a big process for assigning points, but the whole thing is driven to get people to keep moving through this process to take more classes and learn more about LabVIEW. Now, a lot of this, admittedly, is with students in academia, but not all of it. It's a lot of industry people as well, a lot of consultants who are trying to get established. And one way to differentiate is you're a knight of knee or a proven enthusiast or whatever we call it on the web, in addition to our more formal certification programs. So it ends up in your user profile. Michael actually was looking over my shoulder and was reading out to me what some of that is in Chinese. But this is Wenting, who is our marketing Marcom, who's running this. So she only has a LabVIEW level of 10, but I'll cut her a break. So again, it bakes not only activity scoring, but also proficiency scoring. So just being active isn't enough. You have to prove that you know what you're doing. And this one we just started. So we only have about 50,000 people right now, which is a pretty small number in China. Our core discussion forums we talked about, we have about 250,000 active users on that site now. So there's a lot of engineers out there supporting each other. And to kind of put it in a language that is more universal to a marketing audience, in terms of net promoter scores, there's a lot going on in this slide, but the dark blue on the left is the people that use our community sites daily or weekly. So the more you use it, the higher your scores are in terms of the surveys we do for overall satisfaction, likelihood to buy again or promote to your colleagues about NI. And so we're also tracking, in addition to kind of the efficiency metrics, what kind of impact does it have when customers are engaged and active on these different sites and communities. So again, I've learned a lot listening to Michael here this morning of some of the psychology and theory behind some of the stuff we've been doing. A lot of this is baked into the Lithium platform directly, which also helps us. But by kind of having fun with it and really staying close to the users, we've been able to drive a tremendous amount of business value out of these concepts. And we've got some awards too. It's great to get recognized, but at a business level, it's really paying off. So with that, I think we're done for, we got another 5 minutes or so for questions before lunch. That's all that's between you and your lunch is questions and comments for Michael and myself. So thank you.
I'm wondering about the speed camera lottery gamification, if it doesn't work too well, in that once, if the reward pot of the lottery is driven by catching people who are speeding, no one is speeding anymore, no more money in the lottery, no one wants to win. Is it possible to optimize your gamification to the point where you not only have diminishing returns, but you actually hurt your original intention?
Yes. Yes. So that is actually one of the most challenging aspects of designing a gamification strategy, is to catch those unintended consequences before it actually happens. So I give a 2-hour workshops on these kind of things. So this is 20 minutes. There's no way I could cover all this in detail. So I give you an example of unintended consequence. There's these, I would say like a dashboard on your car that shows you a plant and the plant grows based on how you drive your car. If you drive your car in a really fuel efficient manner, your plant will blossom into a flower. But if you step on the brake and the gas a lot and use a lot of gas, then your plant wither and die. Okay, so that seems like a good idea, and people actually are taking those actions. In fact, doing it too well. They're doing it so well that they save so much gas that they're even willing to skip red lights and stop signs. Okay, so that is an unintended consequence, right? Sometimes when it worked too well, what happened? And the other thing is cheating. What happened when people cheat, right? The gamification, the lottery, speed camera lottery, that's gameable, right? You just drive around the loop over and over again, right? You get lots of camera of you, like, picture of you, driving under the speed limit. You optimize your chance for winning. So all of these things have to be taken care of on the back end by analytics. It's a really, really sophisticated analytics. So all the kind of the theory goes into we kind of implement these in behavioral analytics into our Lithium application. So that's, while nothing is ungameable, right? Google is trying to spend millions of dollars trying to make their page rank ungameable. People still game it, right? It's called search engine optimization, right? So right. Yeah, so they try to game it. Everybody's trying to. So there's no system that can prevent gaming 100%, but we could make it like such as not easy to game.
Hi, I'm Maureen. Yay. We actually, I work for a company that does training, employee training, and we actually have done a couple of webinars on gamification, not nearly to the detail that you guys did it, but the question we always get, and I think is really interesting if you could actually answer this as well, is how do you get started? As a marketer, how do you even get started incorporating games into your campaigns, into your day-to-day? So.
I guess I can take a shot at that. And I think the social media presentation, if you were in here earlier, there's talk about centralized versus distributed and budgets and all that stuff. So we depend on for us, it's very technical, right? Everything we do ends up being, you've got to have a judge. And a lot of times it's subjective. You got to look at someone's code and explain why this is better than the other. So we've had to really reach out to the other groups in the company that have those resources, first of all, or else we couldn't even get started. The second is just we have a real business. For us, tech support is not a marketing challenge, although it's a huge driver of customer satisfaction and loyalty. So we worry a lot about it. Just like getting up and running with the products from a product management standpoint is a huge part of our our business. So I guess, that's where we've applied most of these techniques, and the business objective is so important that we've been able to fund it. And I think buying a platform has been huge. We do a lot of stuff in-house, and these are one of the few areas where we've gone out and bought something that has more features than we would ever think to use. So that's been a big step as well.
So I'm curious what needs the engineers were getting met when they were posting and becoming a knight of knee. Was it just for the status of getting that, or what were they getting out of that? What would motivate someone to post 10,000 times when they're probably really busy and don't seem like writers? So,
okay, so I'll take a crack at that. So, obviously, gamification is one of those things that is heavily debated. Is it sustainable, right? And a lot of people say it's not sustainable. And actually, there are a lot of psychological experiments that show that that's not sustainable. And it is actually true. Like, gamification by itself is not sustainable long term. So it's really good for marketing. If you want to drive some activity, to drive people to take certain action in a short time, they do work. But what is it about our platform that makes it so sustainable? People posting like 25,000 posts, right? Is that there's a strategy that we use. Is that essentially, even though gamification doesn't work long term, you just have to work long enough for two things to happen. One is that they realize the value that they generate. Two is that for the system to discover the intrinsic motivation. Okay? So, for example, okay, folks, take the community, for example, right? I may come here to answer a couple of questions just because it's kind of fun. You give me some points and badges and things of that sort and rank. But after a while, I would start to realize that, hey, my contribution is impactful. I get a better product. That's value to me, right? So he realized those values. Once he realized those values, the gamification, the points and badges are essentially a reinforcement. Okay, they're no longer the primary driver. The value becomes the primary driver. Okay, so that becomes a long-term sustainable strategy. And the other one is that for the system to discover your intrinsic motivation. Right? If you are intrinsically motivated to help people, if people reward you to that, you go crazy. You just keep doing it, right? So some people may not have that intrinsic motivation initially, but we can help them develop that by realizing the value of it. So all these are kind of I think the back-end analytic is very complicated. It may seem very simple by just giving people badges and points, but like I said, in the presentation, if you give them too frequently, it's easy for them. Too easy, they'll get bored. If you give them like too kind of infrequent, not frequent enough, they also feel frustrated, right? So to figure that out, when to give them badge, how to give them badge, how much, that's where the analytics lies.
I also think with our users specifically, just sitting here at this conference where everyone has their Twitter handle and on their business card and so on, the engineering community has this. It's exactly the same thing, except it's their value of their reputation. I mean, their reputation of their technical prowess is it's one way to try to articulate that. And so, I mean, it works in that community. Whereas in kind of marketing circles, it's a lot of this, are you being followed? Are you the next big idea? That's another way to quantify it, which, that in the engineering community, I don't think it's more about the actual technical needs that they're providing.
Any more questions?
Last one.
Okay. I'll actually go the opposite direction then. When you talk about having a long-standing community, something that's been established for several years, do you see any issues with setting up or getting new users to buy in when they see a level set at, say, 10 or 20,000 participation points has already been achieved elsewhere?
For us, it hasn't been a problem because we always have new. I mean, they're not going in there to get points. they're going in there because they've got to get a system up and running, and they got to find someone who's solved that problem. And the weird thing about it is, you know, we make the tool, but we don't necessarily know how to use it. Our users, you know, are, again, they use this stuff 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. They know how to make that thing sing and dance way more than we do. And so the way that we can, any ways we can connect those people together is going to be beneficial for the guys that are coming up the curve. Sort of, I think after a while, they may realize that, okay, this point thing turns me on, but you know, every question that's answered is building the knowledge base, so in theory, you never have to ask that. No one has to answer that question again. So it's also, it's a self-fulfilling kind of community knowledge base that's being captured so that, you know, people can get up and running. But there's continued to be demand. I mean, we keep coming up with new questions from the community, so it's building. And everyone's at different levels of their expertise, so it's really about the experts pulling the novices up.
So the other way to address that problem is we use, again, analytics, sophisticated behavioral analytics to address that problem, right? So one very simple way is that you measure the rate instead of the total accumulation. Right? If you measure the accumulation, clearly the oldest user is going to have, you know, have a benefit, have an edge, right? Because they've been there so long. But if you measure the rate, then everybody pretty much, you know, on the same kind of level, right? How many posts, how many answers you answer per week, you could do that. I mean, even though he's been there 10 years, but last week, how much did he actually answer? So that's a very simple kind of, you know, analytic trick that we could do, but there are actually a lot more behavioral inference going behind the system that, you know, we don't actually talk about it.
Yeah, we introduced the quality thing later. It started with activity, but then sort of letting the users police, was that actually a good answer or not, added a whole other dimension that has made it sustained.
So that kind of analytic is what we call reciprocity analytics. So there's another, just to add to that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let's go eat.